everyone, and welcome to an episode of the Red Clay Cook-Off Family Style, a long overdue episode. It's been a while since we filmed a new episode due to the circumstances of the last year, but we are happy to be back, just with a little bit of a twist in comparison to what we usually do. Usually on the show, I bring with me a guest from Red Clay or a family member, and they share a recipe with us. But unfortunately, I can't have guests on the show with me, but fortunately for you, we are going to make this episode just as fun by introducing you to new recipes over 3 episodes where we're going to introduce 3 ingredients that are going to be used in 3 different recipes. By doing so, it'll save you trips to the grocery store and save you time cooking in the kitchen, which means more time with your family and more time enjoying those delicious meals that you create. So today on the show, we have turkey sausage, kale, and butternut squash, which I'm going to go into a little bit more, and it's going to be an amazing rendition of 3 recipes. So let's get the ingredients and get started. First up, the turkey sausage, which I will elaborate more in a moment. Next up is kale. Woo. All right, so we got the kale. The last ingredient of the 3 is butternut squash. So all of the ingredients, let me go into why I chose these ingredients, starting with the sausage. Sausage packs so much flavor just in the meat alone. It's already seasoned, it's ready to work with, and it really does impart a lot of good flavors. Now, I want the turkey sausage to save saturated fat and calories. You could use regular sausage. You could also use ground turkey and flavor it before you use it, but I opted for turkey sausage. Now note, turkey sausage, when you buy it, usually looks like this. It has the casing on it. I remove it from the casing because what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna break the sausage apart, more of like ground turkey sausage meat. To remove it from the casing, it's really simple. Keep in mind, there are other types of turkey or chicken sausage which are a little bit firmer in texture and don't saute as easily as this one that we're about to use. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start this in the pan. I have a large saute pan here over medium. Put about a tablespoon of olive oil in there. I have the pan warm already. Now I'm just gonna pop the sausage in there and let this brown while we talk about the other 3 ingredients. Now, if you wanted to make this dish a vegetarian version, you could certainly do that. We'll talk about a few different options here later in the show, but you could buy vegetarian turkey sausage, or you could omit the sausage altogether, but it does impart a lot of good flavors. So while the sausage continues to brown, I'm gonna talk about our next ingredient, kale. It is packed with so many nutrients. They call it a nutrient powerhouse. It's very nutrient dense. It is loaded with vitamin A, vitamin K, fiber, antioxidants. Some people are like, kale, I'm not really a big fan. But you can make it in so many different varieties of ways. You can put it in smoothies, you can cook it like we're going to today. I even like it sauteed plain. In a lot of cases, you can buy, a lot of stores will already have the kale cleaned and cut for you. If you get it fresh, I would encourage you to soak it in water and let all of the dirt from the kale, the sand and grit, settle to the bottom of the water, move it around, and then rinse it well. When it's not cut, it really does have this large piece on the back, which is very fibrous. So I usually like to remove that piece. So I'm gonna show you on one stem just how to remove it. So I usually hold it flat and just take my knife and slide it right up the back. Voila, okay? So I compost everything in my house. Either I feed it to the goats or the chickens, or I put it in my compost bin, which later goes back into my garden. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but first piece of compost in there. So when you cut kale, I usually like to ball it up, similar to how I cut my herbs on past episodes, and just give it a nice chop. And the size of the kale in this dish really doesn't matter because how we're using it, if you want to go nice and small, if you're not a big fan of kale and you don't want to have the fibrous bits as much, you can chop it smaller, really your call. Next up, the butternut squash. Now this is a cousin to pumpkin. It's in the squash family, the winter squash family. And butternut squash can be used in so many different ways. Today we're gonna roast it and cube it, and it is loaded with vitamin A and vitamin K, antioxidants, same with the kale. It is packed with so much nutrition. And the color inside, I'm gonna show you, is so bright orange, and I'm not sure about you guys, it is very hard to cut, so please be careful with your fingers. So here's the inside of the butternut squash. It's very bright orange, and the brighter the colors, the more nutrition it packs. A lot of people look at butternut squash and it seems kind of intimidating, like how am I gonna prep this, right? So we're not gonna waste this, we're gonna use it. But I like to cut the neck of the squash off first, and then creates a flat surface on my board. I'm actually gonna cut the top off too. And again, it is hard to cut. You can use a peeler, and I'll show you a little bit on the peeler. You can use a peeler. I just prefer not to. I think it's easier to use a knife, but you can use a peeler if you'd like to. I like to create a flat surface, and then I just use my knife and I take it down the side of the butternut squash. I've also had some people say that they'll put it in the oven or get it a little bit soft so it's easier to cut, but it is hard to cut, so please watch those fingers if you try this recipe. I want to make sure you leave with the 10 fingers that you started it with. I'm going to keep turning it. And this is another great option when you're cutting a pineapple. A lot of people always wonder how to cut a fresh pineapple. This also works for that. Make a flat surface on the bottom and just keep turning and cutting. I even actually this past fall, I had leftover pumpkins, because a lot of people get pumpkins and they think they're just for decoration, but they're actually food. I cooked my pumpkins and my dogs loved it. I actually added it to their dog food. So I'm always trying to find ways to save food from hitting the trash can whenever I can. And my dog's bellies are just as important as mine, right? So I created some discs and I'll stack them and I'll just cut three lines, and then I'll move it sideways so the lines are facing this way. And then I'll just come down like that and create cubes. So we are cubing our butternut squash. Nowadays, you see more and more items that are already ready at the grocery store and prepped for you. Butternut squash is one of them. You can also find this frozen. You can find it in the fresh section, already cubed, save you the trouble. All right, and before I finish this, I am just gonna give this sausage a little stir. I'm gonna use the sponge this time. Just like when you're browning any meat. So if you're browning meat for tacos or a meat sauce, just move it around and break it up and really get the all of that meat to the bottom of the pan so it also can cook evenly. And you really do want to break this up into small pieces, because the recipes that we're using this for today, you're going to want a little bit of sausage, a little bit of butternut squash, a little bit of kale, all those bites to just marry together beautifully. Okay, so I'm going to finish the butternut squash. So like I said earlier, take your time when you're cutting this. If you're hesitant, buy it pre-cubed. And frozen will give you a little bit different of a texture. If you do this recipe, it won't turn out just the same as fresh, but it will turn out delicious. So this part, I am going to cut the bottom off. And this is a really large butternut squash, by the way. So I have a flat surface again. I'm gonna do the same thing. Butternut squash grows great. I mean, a lot. It like takes over your yard. So wherever you plant it, don't plant it with a bunch of other veggies that you hope are gonna make it that get overtaken by squash, because it will take over. So it does grow great, as does kale. Kale's another vegetable. Both kale and butternut squash, they'll grow far into the year. So what you do is take your spoon, this is how I hold it. I take it and almost create like a little scrape inside the squash. I'm gonna put these seeds under here. Again, I'm not wasting them. And I'm gonna finish cubing this last butternut squash. We are going to take a quick break while this sausage continues to cook. I'm gonna finish cubing this butternut squash. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to toss it in olive oil, salt and pepper, and roast it in the oven at 400 degrees for about 25-30 minutes. It's gonna get the outside of the cubed butternut squash. It's gonna be nice and caramelized, beautiful flavors. And when we come back, we're gonna move on to our recipes, which I have not told you about yet. So I will share exactly what we're making after the break. Welcome back. Over the break, what we did is we finished browning the turkey sausage, which we have here in a bowl. We took it out of the pan. Do not wash your pan, because all those brown bits at the bottom of the pan bring a lot of flavor, which I add a little bit of olive oil. I diced up an onion, half of a large onion, and 2 large cloves of garlic, and I sauteed it in that same pan. We also finished roasting the butternut squash. Let's go check on that. All right, so you see it's nice and caramelized. We just tossed it with a little bit of olive oil, pinch of salt, pinch of pepper, mix it around, and then I laid it on a nice already sprayed pan. I'm gonna try a little bite. So the flavor of the butternut squash, you get some sweetness, you get a little nuttiness. It's really actually really good. I could just eat this entire pan by itself, but I won't, because it is one of our star ingredients. So I have it back on the counter. I'm just gonna let it sit there while I finish cooking the rest of the 3 ingredients, bringing them all together. So in the pan here, I have the garlic and the onion that's sauteed, nice and caramelized. The bottom, the pan does look slightly Like I said, like there's chard on the bottom, that's from the turkey sausage. And that is not burned, that is flavor. So into that pan, I am gonna take the kale, which we have all diced and ready, all washed and cleaned. I'm gonna add a little bit more olive oil. And you can, if you're really watching your calories, you can measure out the olive oil instead of really going in heavy with it if you're trying to watch your calories, because oil is dense, but it is very heart healthy, the olive oil. So, all right, so I'm gonna go in with the kale. And this looks like a lot, but it will wilt down significantly. So I would say it's about 3 cups of chopped kale. While that cooks, I'm gonna finally reveal the 3 recipes that we are using these 3 ingredients in, because I've kind of left you in the dark so far. The first recipe is a Tuscan soup. So the goal is we're gonna cook all these ingredients as I've done so far. We're gonna blend them all together in one big pot. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna separate them into 3. 1/3 is gonna be used for a Tuscan soup, which I'm gonna make in a crock pot. You could make on the stove. All of these recipes, by the way, you can make standalone, but again, the purpose is to bring you convenience so you have more time to spend with the family. So the Tuscan soup, we'll go over the ingredients really quick. We're gonna use the mixture with the sausage, the kale, and the butternut squash. To that, we are going to add 1 can of crushed tomatoes. I chose the no salt added variety because, as I've said in previous episodes, you can always add salt, but you can't take it away. We're gonna go in with, again, another low sodium option, low sodium chicken broth or chicken stock. I use different brands, honestly, it depends on what's on sale. You can also make your own chicken stock, freeze it, totally your call. We have cannellini beans. Cannellini beans are actually, I feel like growing in popularity. The creamy texture on the inside and the soft exterior of the bean, it's really palatable. It's a nice bean to use. And it is loaded with fiber, with protein, and it can be used as a meat alternative. Earlier in the show, I talked about how you could make this a vegetarian dish and omit the turkey sausage. You certainly could do that. Whenever I use canned beans, which I usually do steer more towards canned, you can do dried, it just takes us a longer process. But when you do canned beans, you do want to rinse and drain them. So I put them in a strainer, rinse some water over it, some cold water, and get all the excess juice off out of the beans. So part of these beans is going to be used for the other recipe part in the soup. I have bay leaves, which impart a nice flavor, and then I have herbes de Provence. So this is an herb from France, and it is very aromatic. I'm just going to show you for a moment. So you have in herbes de Provence, it's a blend of herbs. Most prominently, it's marjoram, savory, rosemary, oregano, thyme, and lavender. You see actually the lavender specks in that. It's a gorgeous blend of herbs. I feel like underutilized by many, but it really does give a nice flavor. The other recipe we're making is stuffed peppers, not your traditional style stuffed peppers, and we'll go into this more, but we have the peppers here. So the stuffed peppers is the second recipe, and the third recipe is going to be a pasta dish where we again add all 3 of these ingredients, among other flavors, including goat cheese. So you can see it's already condensed in size. All grains really, they seem overwhelming when you pop them in the pan, but then all of a sudden they're like, and such a little amount that actually comes out. So, and don't worry, you're not losing any nutrients, you're just condensing the nutrients. It's really essentially cooking out the water. If you don't have kale, no problem. You could use spinach, you could use Swiss chard, you could use escarole, you could use a bunch of different things. I personally love kale in these dishes. While it continues to cook, I'm gonna go ahead and blend all of the ingredients together, which is the purpose of this episode, is really convenient. So we're gonna make this one big pot of kale, turkey sausage, and butternut squash, and we're gonna make 3 different recipes. Okay, so I'm going in with a cooked sausage. Those colors already look incredible, but it is not anywhere near complete yet because we got that pop of orange coming next. So I'm gonna go grab the butternut squash. So I'm going in with the butternut squash. Now, if you did opt for a frozen butternut squash, you would not want to roast as long, or if you roast on convection, you wouldn't want to roast as long. But if you went for the frozen butternut squash, it's going to take a lot less time. And as I said earlier, I really keep an eye on my food, and as should you, because everyone's ovens are different, and the size that you cube the butternut squash will determine how long it cooks. Going in, don't let one piece get lost there. This is where the magic happens. We are going to take this into 3 different things. It's like we're going to transform this one pan of nutritious and delicious goodness into 3 dishes. So we're going to do the soup. Soup comes together really fast. Once you've done this part, a lot of these dishes will come together really quickly. So we're going to go ahead and take 1/3 of what we have cooked here. Now you could stop here You could just do 1/3 of this and freeze the other 2/3. We're gonna go ahead and take 1/3 of this. You don't have to be precise with this. No matter what you do, it is going to be outrageously delicious. All right, so we got about 1/3 of that in. I'm gonna save this other. So to this pan, and again, you could start this all in here if you wanted to. We're gonna add 1 can of my crushed tomatoes. All right, 1 can of crushed tomatoes is going in. I've talked about it in past episodes, but canned tomatoes, high in lycopene, cancer-fighting antioxidants. I know I use cancer-fighting antioxidants in general a lot, but there really are so many vitamins and minerals in every color of every fruit and veggie. So try and color your life with fruits and vegetables, and tomatoes are a great source. We have chicken stock. Low sodium is what I choose. I'm gonna use about 2/3 this time, just because I don't have as much of the turkey sausage and the kale, a little bit more. So the consistency, if you like it soupier, if you like it more broth based, you could go in with more chicken stock. You're not gonna compromise any flavor by doing that. I just wanna keep it a little bit more consistent to like a chili almost. I'm gonna go in with a little bit of beans because I'm saving a lot of these for the other recipes. So about, if you were doing this on your own without the other recipes, about 1 can of beans. Again, rinsed and drained. I'm actually using a lot of the similar ingredients throughout the whole recipe. I'm going in with 1 bay leaf, and then last but not least, the herbes Provence. I'm going in with about a teaspoon. If you really like this, you can add more. I wouldn't go too heavy on it because a little bit goes a long way. If you don't have herbes Provence, you can always use Italian seasoning. All right, so that is done. We're gonna let all those flavors marry together. And you notice I didn't put salt and pepper in here. That's because I was seasoning this along the way. If you made it from scratch, I can put the single recipe as well for this up for you, but you don't want to go too heavy on the salt and pepper because it's already in there. Next up, stuffed peppers. So again, I'm taking about 1/3 of the magic 3 ingredients to this bowl. I am going to add 1 cup of Italian seasoning breadcrumbs. If you're watching your salt intake, if you have high blood pressure, you're watching your salt intake, you could just opt for plain non-seasoned breadcrumbs because the season does have salt. So we're gonna add the 1 cup of breadcrumbs to the dish. We're going in with a 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese, and this just gives it a lot of flavor. And then the beans. You could, if you wanted to, you could smash some of these beans to really hold the texture together. I'm just gonna go ahead and pop them in today. And then you go ahead and give this a stir. That's a giant spoon for this. So stir all this. You are gonna need a little bit of liquid. So if you're watching your calories, you could sneak a little bit of chicken stock in here because it's a little dry and it's not gonna hold in the peppers really well. And that's why it's good to sometimes smash some of the beans, give a little bit more texture. So I'm gonna go in with a little drizzle of olive oil, and then I might soften it with a little bit of chicken stock. So about a tablespoon of olive oil I'm going in with. And I'll give it just a little bit of chicken stock since I have it here. And again, this is just to moisten the breadcrumbs. You know what I'm forgetting? I'm like, why isn't this binding? Because I'm forgetting an ingredient. Eggs. So I have some fresh chicken eggs here. So we are gonna go in with 2 chicken eggs. All right, so go ahead and whisk your eggs, pour it in. This was the missing ingredient. So the egg really works as a binder to really hold all the ingredients together for this stuffed pepper dish. See, it's all pulling together, binding, making the breadcrumbs nice and sticky so it adheres to all the other ingredients. I'm gonna set this aside really quick because I wanna show you how I personally prep a pepper. I've seen a lot of people that prep peppers a certain way, and I'm like, no, because they cut the whole top off. They'll lob the whole top off like this, and they waste all of that top part of the pepper, which why would you do that, right? If you were to do that, I would encourage you to chop it up and saute it a different way. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just cut this little bit of the bottom. Don't worry, I'm going to eat that. Bottom is now flat. Take your knife, and I just go ahead and come around the top. A smaller knife might have worked better actually. But I just kind of cut right around the stem and try not to waste not, whatnot. There you go, there's the pepper. So you still need to go ahead and go in after those little bit of seeds and pulp that's left. So to my compost bin, I'm gonna take out the seeds. So the pepper is now ready for stuffing. So this alone, hello, pretty goodness. Bell peppers are loaded with vitamin C, which is great for your immune system, which right now we all need to boost our immune systems, right? So we are going to fill these peppers with the stuffing. I'm just gonna do it over the dish. That way, if any misses the pepper, it just goes in the next one. So I like to stuff mine in there, and I usually come back and top off. Now, like I said earlier, this would also work if you cut the butternut squash in half. If you had an extra butternut squash and you cut it in half and stuffed it in the little cubby that is naturally there for you after you take out the seeds, you could stuff it right in there and pop that in the oven as well, and that would be equally good. We're gonna cover this with foil. You don't wanna bake it uncovered, because what's gonna happen is it's gonna get burnt on the top. So we're gonna trap all of the heat in here with the foil. We're gonna pop it in the oven at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. 30 to 35 minutes, again, depending on your oven. And when we come back, we are gonna finish our last dish. So I'm gonna pop this in the oven. Welcome back to our final segment where these 3 dishes are all gonna come together. The last dish is going to start with the red onions, which I sliced into half moons and I sauteed in a pan. You could skip this step and just go right with these 3 ingredients, but I think the caramelized onions adds so much flavor. The sweetness, it pairs really well with the goat cheese. So what we're doing is we're about to pull together a pasta extremely fast with caramelized onions, goat cheese, the 3-star ingredient mix, and some pasta, and then we're done. So the goat cheese I'm gonna put aside. So we have the onions that have already caramelized, and that what happened while you guys we were on break. I'm gonna pop in the rest of the 1/3 of the mixture here to the onions. And what we have here is the pasta is already cooked. So all of these ingredients are already cooked. So really we're just assembling. So the pasta is already cooked. I went with a campanelli noodle. I just like, they're just so much fun. But I would go with a bite-sized noodle, whatever you do. You could use pasta, like a spaghetti kind of strand, that would work, but I like more of a noodle shape. So don't worry about straining this off really well, because the pasta water really acts like a binder. The starchy liquid really pulls together the dish. All right, and I'm gonna go in with a little bit of chicken stock that we use, same chicken stock we used for the soup. I'm gonna go in with about half a cup of that, just for a little more flavor. I'm just gonna mix this together. While I let this saute for a moment for the flavors really to pull together, really is already ready to eat. You could eat it now. I'm just gonna give it a little bit. I mean, that doesn't scream pretty pasta. I don't know what does. We're not done yet, but that's just, you could eat it just like that. So while that continues to cook for a moment, I'm gonna show you the dishes, the other 2 dishes that we've made here today. The peppers, I did find that fifth pepper and I used the rest of that stuffing, and it actually worked out perfect to size. So the peppers are nicely cooked. The tops are slightly charred, which again, you do wanna leave the foil on because you will char everything. So I'm gonna try that color. I'm gonna go with red. The red pepper is actually one of the most nutritious peppers, because the darker the pepper, longer it sits on the vine, the better the flavor, the nutrition gets. Got my knife and my fork, and I'm gonna cut this baby open and show you what the inside looks like. Now look, you can see like the little bit of Parmesan cheese is pulling. You see the flecks from the butternut squash, the beans, the kale. It's just beautiful colors. All right, let's go in. So look at how pretty that looks. Beautiful, right? That is so amazing. It's really good. The flavors, the nutrition that I know, the nutrition in that packed in that pepper is amazing. If I didn't have to show you these other 2 dishes, I would continue eating that. But we have another one, so we're on 2 of the 3. We have the soup. So going in with some soup. So there she blows. Tuscan, beautiful chili, it almost looks like, but the flavors are definitely different than chili. Don't compare. I have a little bit of Parmesan cheese I'm gonna go on the top with. This would also work really well if it was summertime and I had some fresh basil or some fresh parsley. Dice that up, pop it on the top, and the vibrant green flecks of color will add color and flavor. So going in for a bite. Again, I'm gonna try and get all 3 of those superstar ingredients from today. Very good. Again, bread in this will just soak up all those amazing flavors that have already happened while this dish sat. This would be a good one if you had a busy day, you know you're gonna have a busy night, coming late night at work, pop in a crock pot and let it sit all day on slow, and it'll be an amazing dish you get to come home to. This also freezes really well. I love freezing soups because they hold up really well and it makes a really quick dinner. Okay, so the final of the 3rd dish for today. The last ingredient I'm going in with today is goat cheese. I love goat cheese. It's one of those things that some people love, some people not so much. The tangy creaminess that the goat cheese gives pairs really well with this dish. So I'm just gonna use my fingers. I'm gonna save a little bit for topping. So you wanna add this in towards the tail end of cooking because it's gonna melt really fast. You don't want it to really melt into the dish. You don't wanna totally break it up and melt it, but oh, I love goat cheese. The tangy flavors with the butternut. Another ingredient you could add, I actually did not add it today, but you could, would be nutmeg. Nutmeg is actually, here it is, it's actually the center of a fruit similar to an apricot, which I just learned. And you could either use a little microplaner, grate some in, so you could go in with that. I would just keep it to like a pinch. So this is done. I'm going to pop this. Let's see if I can get the nice view for you there. All those beautiful colors as they exit the pan, hopefully, into the bowl. Okay. Now as a finishing touch, I'm gonna take the rest of the goat cheese and I'm gonna crumble it right over top. Crumble the goat cheese. And another thing I did on the break was earlier I talked to you guys about the butternut squash seeds. Why waste them, right? I didn't. We went ahead and cleaned them. We roasted them in the oven, 400 for about 8 minutes, 10 minutes. And here's the pumpkins, here's the butternut squash seeds. So there they are, these are roasted, beautiful just alone. You could just eat them just alone. So I'm gonna take some of these just for a little crunch. This would also work really well, I'm actually gonna do that. Work really well in the soup. We are using so many of the same ingredients, but they all taste different. That's the beautiful thing about this episode today. So the final dish, let's try this pasta. Make sure I get the kale, the goat cheese. I'm trying to get that perfect bite. All right, the caramelized onions, the red, the green, the orange, the white. Make sure I even get one of those pumpkin seeds. Ooh, it's a goner. All right, here we go. I love, love, love the addition of goat cheese to that. The addition of nutmeg would be nice too. So keep it light, but you can go in with nutmeg, put in around the same time that you put the other ingredients together. I have a smorgasbord of ingredients here, that I'm going to enjoy after I depart from you guys. But I would like to say thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure having you and sharing these recipes with you. I really hope you take time to try these recipes and make them part of your family favorite tradition recipes around your dinner table. And remember, you're not cooking in style unless you're cooking family style. I don't know where to start. Go with soup.